I'm Mike Hamilton, and this is Threat Watch, the weekly 15-minute podcast from Lumifi Cyber, where we're going to dig into a few cyber stories of the week and try to put them into some context. Today, I am speaking with Jean-Luc Peck, Lumifi's Director of Incident Response Services, and somebody that gets no sleep for long periods of time. So how's the body holding up, buddy?
Pretty good so far, but the caffeine's still kicking in, so ask me again in an hour.
Yeah, I left my coffee in my car. So I'm drinking herb tea. It's not working.
Yeah, it doesn't have quite the same punch, does it?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so today is a really busy day. We got to get through with this because I got stuff coming up, as you know.
Well, I
Uh,
think we should dig right into the teaser that you did on Monday, because this is a little bit hard for us to reconcile this particular article. We're seeing some indicators that the federal government is starting to lean into building building up a cyber workforce, because we're so shorthanded across the country right now that we're losing billions of dollars to crime. State secrets and intellectual property are going out the door through espionage, and yet at the same time, our friends at CISA are essentially being shut down and we're going to be left without their support. So how do those two things go together, Mike?
I don't have an answer for that. I will say so. So part of this is good, right? The Congress is doing something called the PIVOTT Act with two T's, right? Providing individuals various opportunities for technical training. Everything has to have an acronym. That's a good bill, right? And I hope Congress moves it forward. So what that's about, they're expanding what's called the Scholarship for Service program. That's always, or for a long time, it's existed for four-year schools. 4 years of tuition for 4 years of service. Now they're going to take it to community colleges. 2 years of free tuition, 2 years of cybersecurity service to the government. The other thing that they're finally talking about is skills-based hiring rather than, requiring a 4-year degree. So if you can do the job, you can do the job, right? You and me, we didn't go to school to learn cyber. You just had to stay up all night and get into a bunch of trouble. Maybe I'll talk about that sometime, not that the statute of limitations has expired, but regardless, with respect to CISA, we've already lost election security support. We don't know if we're going to continue to have, the KEV catalog, right? Known exploited vulnerabilities. That was hugely useful. They were doing free risk and resilience assessments for critical infrastructure. They're doing free perimeter scanning for local governments, and all that is in question right now. So I don't know how those two things go together.
Well, so if we've got all these people who are going to get their training at community colleges and they're maybe getting a degree or a certificate or something, but then they're planning to go into government service. Now, if the main cyber agency of the federal government, CISA, if they're not going to be around or they're not going to be as big, where do we think those people are going to go?
Yeah, therein lies the rub, huh? Right? So that's a good question. And I think the only answer would be with federal agencies. You work 2 years at EPA, GSA, DOD, if you can survive the background process, or whatever federal agency is left standing. But the juxtaposition of these two things, ramping up the workforce while firing the workforce, does not create the perception of a strategy that's aligned with realities right now. I'll just say that. I don't have an answer for how they thought this through. So we better move on.
It sounds kind of like maybe the executive and legislative branches aren't like working in lockstep or high coordination. Maybe they should get together and have lunch and talk about this or something.
Not a bad idea.
From what you're describing, the confusion and the uncertainty, especially for people who are in the programs or interested in getting into the programs, is a super real thing right now.
Yeah.
But speaking of governments doing things that cause blowback, tell me more about Apple being ordered by the UK to create backdoor access for all of our encrypted iCloud backups. This is
Yeah.
something I hear about every once in a while, and it always goes well.
It always goes well. Yeah. In fact, every time they suggest they're going to do this, right? Law enforcement needs access. We got to be able to break into phones, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The tech companies always say, if you do that, other people are going to find out. And oddly enough, we have a recent example of that. Okay. So you've heard of CALIA, right?
Mhm.
The Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. I think that came from the Clinton administration. So that was to authorize a system that would allow law enforcement to surveil communications, right? It's a single point that they would funnel, telephone communications through so that they could surveil. That system was located by the Chinese government in the process of compromising what sounds like all of our telecom companies, and then used it to, here's the spoiler, surveil the communications of our government. Okay? So, as for Apple, what this would do would grant British security agencies unrestricted access to users' encrypted data worldwide, not just within the UK, right? So you're storing encrypted stuff in iCloud, and if law enforcement wants to see that stuff, they've got the key. That's how it works. That's how they
Now,
want it to work.
that sounds good on paper, but I think I saw something that Apple would also be prohibited by law, I assume, from telling people, letting their customers know if those encrypted backups had been accessed by law enforcement. If Apple says no, what does the what does the British government do from here?
Well, so the encryption for backups is an option that's not activated by default. So what they're probably going to do is drop that option for UK users, right? It's called Advanced Data Protection Service,
Yeah, I've seen the little
ADPS.
flip switch, but I haven't looked into it yet. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, rather than compromising its encryption, it's just going to take that option away. So UK users wouldn't have that encryption option, and Apple would not address the broader demand for global access to encrypted data. That's probably how it's going to go.
But all of this is based around current capabilities with regards to things like brute force decryption, throwing supercomputers at solving password problems, that kind of stuff. And so, if we get quantum computing that comes and hits the streets, kind of like the way we're on track to,
Yeah.
that could render a whole lot of this moot, couldn't it?
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Looking at the time, I've got a few more threats and vulnerabilities that folks should be paying to, so let's kind of blitz through these. Number one, CISA has let us know about an actively exploited Linux kernel flaw. CISA is urging federal agencies to make sure that they address vulnerable Linux and Android devices by February 26th. That gives everybody about 13 days to make sure your stuff is patched here.
Good luck.
iOS 18.3.1, again talking about Apple, they put out a security fix for a flaw used in a quote unquote extremely sophisticated attack. So that tells us that the attack was actually happening and it was out in the wild, which means it is also really important to update your Apple devices. Sonic Wall firewall exploit floating around out there lets hackers take over VPN sessions. I can attest on the incident response side, we've seen a lot of ransomware activity over the last
Yeah.
year or so, which all centered around unpatched firewalls and VPN connections to places that they should not have been.
Yep.
So this is true for Sonic Walls most of the time, but it is definitely true right now. Patch your stuff. And kind of along those themes, we also have one about Fortinet. There is a new 0-day floating around out there for hijacking firewalls as well. This particular flaw impacts FortiOS 7.0 through 7.0.16. A couple of other versions floating around out there. It's going to be important to check that link. But if you have a Fortinet firewall, make sure it's patched just like a Sonic Wall firewall. And that, I think, brings us almost to our time. So, Mike, what are we leaving everybody with?
Well, we like to talk about one thing that's a little more on the absurd side. So did you see this article that says American Airlines flight delayed by suspected bomb threat? Did you see that one?
I did see that one.
Yeah. From the definitely don't do this category, someone on an American Airlines flight, and wow, they're getting a lot of bad press lately, decided to rename their phone hotspot SSID to "There is a bomb on this flight." So of course, someone reported that to the captain, who brought the plane back down and asked the person, went out into the plane, asked the person to self-identify so they could just treat it as a hoax and get going again. No one did. So all the passengers were marched off the plane and treated to what I got to believe is a TSA inquisition. So again, definitely don't do that. Probably okay to call it something like, FBI surveillance van, but not a bomb threat. Okay,
Well,
that's it. We got to go.
we got to turn off devices before we take off anyway. So, man, that's twice that somebody's getting in trouble there. All right. Thank you very
All
much,
right.
everybody. Thank you,
Yep.
Mike.
Yep. Sign up for the Infosec Insider News Blast on the Lumify site. Watch our events page. Stuff's coming up, and definitely come to free security awareness training on the last Friday of the month, because there's no firewall for gullibility. See you later, JLP.
Adios, Mike.
All right. Bye.